Hey, welcome to Wolf's Watch. Welcome to Wolf's Watch. Got a little problem here that we are getting corrected. And sorry about that little pause there at the beginning. Welcome to Wolf's Watch. I'm Wolf. And as always, I'm scouring the countryside looking for food bits to bring back to you to feed your mindset, to help you improve your mastery and leadership, things you can apply in your life and in your business. I have a question for you today. How are you making the tough calls? The tough decisions that every leader comes across. When I went to college, the whole reason that I went was, well, really two reasons. I could get out of high school early, and I did not like being in high school. It was more of a prison experience than anything. I just did not like it. Couldn't wait to get out. They would let me out 6 months early if I went to college. I got accepted to college that I chose because they were placing people at the end of the program. They had, high 95, 90s, 95 plus percent placement rate for graduates in terms of finding jobs. And that was a huge issue. Now, for some reason, where I went to high school, they said, no, you can't graduate and just get a job. You have to stick it in here. We won't let you, even though you finished all your requirements, we will not let you graduate early. We will not let you leave the building early if you're just going to go to work. Didn't realize going to work was such a bad thing. I said, if you're going to college, you can do it. It's like, great. Got accepted to a college. So when we, after first semester of senior year in high school, which I only went half a day anyway, worked in the afternoons, I was done. And I got to start college coming back from the winter break. They had a great placement program, which I found was true. You see, and the issue was I grew up in Ohio. And this was the mid 1980s, early 1980s. And you may be too young to remember this, or you may remember this very clearly. Late 70s, early 80s, we're having an economic challenge. It was a really intense recession. It didn't last long, but there was a very intense recession in the late 70s. But even worse, in Ohio, automobile industry was in decline. Steel industry was in decline. There's a lot of tires. Goodyear, Goodrich tires. A lot of the industries that were supplying a lot of jobs, really the lifeblood of the economy, were in transition. There really were no jobs were very hard to find. Good paying jobs. I was driving a truck for delivery truck for minimum wage, and that wasn't really a long-term strategy. I didn't know what to do. Jobs were minimum. There were I knew a lot of people that were blue collar union, had great lifestyles, but factories were closing. Union jobs, good jobs of any kind were hard to find. And I didn't have, a track record in management and sales. And so my perspective was a big part of the problem, right? The frame that I had was not a perspective of being able to go out and make stuff happen. So I went to college, and even though my dad growing up had always, he just provided great guidance, great counsel, and was always very encouraging. So you can do anything, apply yourself, you can do anything. And I talked to him about, both my parents about the college thing, and off I went. 3.5 years later, I'm graduating with my bachelor's degree. Great placement program. Here's the problem. I studied electronics. Remember, grew up in Ohio. I studied electronics. Where's electronics big? California, not just the West Coast, but at that time, particularly specifically California. I had absolutely no interest in moving to California. It just was not something that interested me. I didn't want to move so far away from my dad. While I was in college, my mother had passed away unexpectedly. So would be leaving him home alone. So I wasn't interviewing for jobs on the West Coast. Everybody I graduated with was interviewing for jobs. And we had some great talent, some great people in our class. The thing was, it just wasn't part of my plan. I wanted to get a job local. So I started the school, didn't really have connections with any local opportunities. So I went out and hunted it for myself. went to places like Detroit, outside around Ohio, or different parts of Ohio to interview for jobs, and there were a lot of people competing for them, and the competition was fierce. My grades, not so good. I barely got out of high school in terms of my grades. Did a little bit better in college. I still wasn't in the top of the class by any stretch of the imagination. Wasn't the bottom, but I could see it from where I was at, and that limited options as well. So I'm interviewing for jobs. Then this amazing thing happened. A company called Hughes Aircraft came on campus to interview. Now, I was very familiar with the story of Howard Hughes, who founded Hughes Aircraft. He had an unbelievable impact on technology, on modern technology as we know it. Read about his history. There's something we'll do is maybe a session on that, just because he, as a leader, as an entrepreneur, as an innovator, very fascinating individual. But he and the people that he attracted to him had a huge impact on technology. So, because think about this: Hughes Aircraft, Jack Northrop of Northrop, which is still a big corporation. You may have heard of them in the U.S. Jack Northrop, who founded Northrop, or what's known as Northrop Grumman now, worked for Howard Hughes designing aircraft, and then split off to design his own planes. Two gentlemen by the name of Ramo and Wooldridge, who were lab managers at Hughes Aircraft, are the RNW in TRW. Now, you may not have heard of TRW because 15 years ago or more, Northrop bought TRW. But here were two very iconic companies in aerospace, in American technology, that that were people that had worked for Howard Hughes. So I knew a lot of this history. I had grown up reading these advertisements that Hughes Aircraft ran in Scientific American. Yes, I'm a recovering engineer. I love to ride Harleys. I grew up reading Scientific American also. One of the things that I liked in Scientific American is these things were called Hughes scopes. And they would talk about these cool technologies that the people at Hughes Aircraft were working with. I was fascinated by that. They won awards for them. They were very well written. They're great stories. Hughes Aircraft. So I'm going, wow, Hughes Aircraft. These guys I'm going to interview with. To keep a short story short, I got an offer from Hughes Aircraft. I hit it off with the person who was one of the interviewers, Steve Ogg. Thank you, Steve. I appreciate that. Hope you're still enjoying singing with your band and enjoying your retirement years now. Imagine just as busy as you were as an executive. Because see, Steve Ogg played in a band. So during the interview, we connected. We had something we related to. So we talked about music and the band and engineering and the questions they would normally have, plus a lot more. So we established a relationship of sorts during the interview time. And I was one of the first interviewees that they talked to. So I always like to be first or last. It helps to either create, set the bar or anchor the perception. So I got an offer. Not only did I get an offer, but I found out I would be working for Steve Ogg. So I knew who I was going to be working for. It played a lot in attracting me to it. Plus, the money was really good. And so here I have this challenge. Now, I don't want to go to California, and I've got this dream job offer. I want to stay close to home because my dad, who's been such a great influence on my life, is now living alone, in Ohio because my mother had passed away. And I'm like, do I take this dream job? Do I honor my relationship with my father? Because I didn't, it's like, I don't want to abandon him when he needs me most. He's still mourning the loss of his wife of 34 years. And we sat down, we had a long talk about that. It was a very, very tough decision. Part of what made it an even tougher decision is it's two good options. It's not like one's going, that's, not really, it's an okay job. It's like, man, it's exciting to have the opportunity to work for Hughes Aircraft. The other option was, I still get to be close to my dad. It's the area I grew up in. There's a lot about the lifestyle there that I enjoyed. So it was, it was two good options in how to pick between them. What is really the best decision to make? So as a leader, you've likely experienced this. It's a tough call. What do you do? Do I honor my father and stay in Ohio and stay close there, even though there's no jobs? So now I'm a college graduate driving a truck for minimum wage. Do I take this dream job offer in California, which I don't want to do? I mean, I want the job. I just don't want it to be in California. And we were, so we sat down. We had a couple of heart to hearts about it. And my dad was just true to form of being the mentor that he was in my life. He said, I can't make the decision for you. You know what you really want and what is going to be best for you. And he was honest. He said, look, if the best decision is to take this opportunity in California, this is what you worked so hard through college for. Take the job. Don't stay here just because of me and turn that down. So he gave me permission to make a decision that was best for me, regardless of the impact it would have on him, because he wanted me to stay home. He made that clear, but he didn't ask me to stay home. Big difference. How do you make decisions in those circumstances? As a leader, you're going to be faced with those types of tough calls. And there's not going to be the easiness, the convenience of this is a bad option, this is a good option. Boom, let's pick the good option. Sometimes, as my mentor Larry Broughton says, it'll be do you do the easy wrong thing or the hard right thing. It's a different type of tough call. This is easy to do, but this is what you really should do. And man, it's going to be tough. It's going to be hard work. It's going to be risky. There was a lot of that in the decision of whether or not to move to California. If we go to California, there is no guarantee that job's going to pan out. And I will be in Los Angeles, which really isn't an attractive area for me to live. Weather is not enough for me. There's a lot of people, and I live here now in Los Angeles and have been here for a long time. So, spoiler, which decision I made. I'm talking to you from Los Angeles. And here's the thing, though. At the time, I had no idea what really waited for me in Los Angeles, and I didn't know anybody. I knew the guy that hired me, Steve, but we had talked for half an hour total, one-on-one. So even though I knew him, I had no connection to anybody or anything in Los Angeles. And like I was pointing out, weather wasn't really so much an issue for me. I grew up in cycles of seasons. I understood how to deal with weather, and there's ups and downs of each season. There's positive things, and there's things that are hassles about each of the four seasons. Whether it's wintertime and it's snowy and icy, springtime where you get the volatile weather, summertime where it gets hot, fall when everything's starting, the leaves change colors, but everything kind of gets into this getting cold and dry, and everything wilting can be kind of depressing. So I mean, there's positive and negative to everything. Yet I didn't, in LA, it's like I didn't know anything about LA. Wasn't particularly interested in living in a big city. I'm a city kid growing up. Grew up in Columbus, Ohio. But Columbus, Ohio is smaller than Long Beach in population at that time. Physical size covered more area, but in population was smaller than the city of Long Beach, which is just a small part of the LA Metroplex. So I was like, what to do, which one to take. So when you're faced with decisions like that, where you have commitments, longstanding commitments that may be disrupted, but there's a great long-term opportunity that has a lot of unknowns and a lot of risk. There's no guarantee. That's a tough call. As a leader, that's your role, to be able to discern what is going to be the best, especially when all things being equal, when you look at it from a system of values, core principles, there's no clear, this doesn't work because it violates these principles, or this doesn't work because whatever it may be. And you have to make the tough call. How do you go about doing that? So I looked at what was in that particular case as a deeply personal decision. As an entrepreneur, a lot of your business decisions are deeply personal, aren't they? So I looked at it and said, my dad was right. I worked like a dog for 3.5 years to get through engineering school. And it was tough because it was all technical school. all tech, no fluff, no, I mean, we had fun, and I grew up, I went to college in the area where I grew up, so I had friends throwing parties and whatnot. So there's a lot happening socially. At the same time, though, we it was nothing but straight technical and engineering. When we were doing our required senior lab projects, which was part of the requirement for graduation, we had to design and demonstrate actual products. We were doing stuff that students at Ohio State University in their graduate electrical engineering program were envious of. They're going, "Well, we're barely just starting to get into that kind of stuff, and here you guys have been doing it for nearly a full year." It was that level of intensity. That's a lot of work. So what did I do? I took the job and went to Los Angeles. It was a tough call. It was not either decision go either way. There was no. It left me uneasy. Do you find that in some of your decisions? You make the choice. It's a tough call, and this is a hallmark of a tough call decision. Neither one's bad. Neither one's bad. Neither one's inherently wrong. But when you make it, it still sits a little, oh man, I hope that was right. Because the future is uncertain. There's no guarantees. And it could be that, this one's going to be better. And guess what? There will be times where a month, a month, a year, 20 years down the road, you'll look back at that decision and go, oh man, that wasn't, the other decision may have been better. You know how the decision you made turned out, and you look back and go, man, should have gone the other way. The hard reality of that is maybe may have gone the other way and been even worse if you're not happy with how the decision you made turned out, or you can see how it set in motion a chain of events that caused other problems. That goes with the tough call scenario as well. When you make a tough call, there's going to be unintended consequences that will create other complications, let's say, for lack of a better way to put it, because it's not inherently good or bad most of the time. Sometimes there will be an unforeseen complication that really is a big negative for you. Well, deal with it, learn from it, work with it. The decisions made, you've moved forward, learn from that. And that's the challenge of being able to see clearly from the future on those decisions. See, I can look back today and see, knowing what I know today, being who I am today, not who I was as a 21-year-old freshly minted Bachelor of Science degree alleged engineer, right? But who I am today after decades of experience and learning and maturing. I can look back and see how, if I had made the other decision, I could have made that work. But I had no entrepreneurial vision at that time, even though I had the encouragement and support of my dad, regardless of what I would have chosen. And I had seen entrepreneurs, friends of his that were entrepreneurs. So it just didn't get it at the time. Now I'm firmly on the entrepreneurial path. But you know what? If I had made that other decision, here's two problems with that. Even if I knew then what I know today, then I'm not the man that I am today. So odds are I wasn't ready for a lot of the things that today I know I could have done in order to create a great life, to be an entrepreneur in that area at that time. How do you make the tough calls? Do you shy away from them? I tell you what, as a leader, you better not, because that's your role. You, as a leader, need to step up and step into those hard calls. Don't make them alone, though. I talked to the person who was most affected by that decision, my dad. I talked to resources that I had at the university, the school that I went to, about that decision, about what the reality was of the local opportunities versus what was happening on the West Coast, where electronics was just going boom. It's had to weigh the decisions. I made a call, and I ended up, and I'll remember this because my friends threw a big bash the night before I left. I almost missed my plane in the morning. I got to Los Angeles, and I remember this to this day, sitting on my luggage at LAX. You could still smoke outside. I was smoking a cigarette because I was so hungover and so green. I was just like, smoking a cigarette is going to help with that, right? Trying not to throw up on the sidewalk. Taxis lined up and they want me. And I was like, you know what? Just give me a minute. Let me sit here. And I'm looking around and going, man, what have I done? I'm in Los Angeles, have absolutely no connection to anyone, no idea what's going to happen next. But that was the choice that I made. So I stood up, got my luggage, went to the taxi, called my dad when I got to the hotel that Hughes had arranged for me. Checked in with my dad, maintained that relationship. It was good to talk to him. It was a lifeline while I was off on this new adventure. So how do you make tough calls like that? Do you include those that are affected by it? Do you avail yourself of other resources? Do you take advantage? Do you make a realistic assessment of how much time you have to make the decision so that it's not done in haste, not done in a panic? And whether it's 15 minutes or 15 days, take advantage of that time to make sure that it's a well-informed, clear-headed decision that aligns with your head and your heart. The only thing that made it work for me moving to Los Angeles at that time was my heart was in it because I was so excited and so proud to be part of the Hughes aircraft team. It was something that I never thought I could achieve. And it was the beginning of many experiences like that because I had decided to take advantage of the once in a lifetime opportunity with Hughes aircraft, which proved to be, it proved that I was totally clueless in understanding what that meant. Yet I felt like I had abandoned my father. So, there was that, this doesn't feel, I am happy about this, but man, this doesn't feel good at one level. My father still encouraged me, never berated me, never guilt tripped me about that. Never, it was never, geez, when you're coming home kind of conversation, never did any of that. He's just like, hey, how you doing? What's new? When I would talk to him, which was great. So again, consider how you make those calls. Do you have that alignment of heart and head? Are you taking advantage of the resources available? Are you including the people affected in the decision? And are you taking advantage of the time, making a realistic assessment of how quickly the decision needs to be made? See, in my example, Hughes Aircraft said, look, here's the offer. You've got this amount of time to get back to us. I was like, great. And I used most of it. So that way you can make the best decision possible and then stick with it as it plays out, learn from it as it plays out, and also be realistic about what you did down the road. Not looking back, none of that, oh, if I had gone the other way, this, and this would have happened. Maybe not. No way of knowing. So if you're going to think like that, do it from the perspective of what you can learn from that thought exercise. But don't delude yourself into thinking, oh, if I'd only, then this would have. Because there's no this would have. There's no guarantees. It's just what you learn. You make a decision, you get an experience from that, you learn from it. You apply what you've learned, continue to adapt and move forward. Especially when right now, this has come back to, we've talked a lot about leading change on these episodes, especially when leading change in times like we find ourselves in during the Great Shutdown with all the pivot and adapt. You need to adapt as an entrepreneur anyway to changing circumstances inside your company, outside your company, with your market opportunities that arise. But it's important that you make the hard calls and that you make a sound decision, the best possible in the moment, and then move on. So share some of your tough calls. What have you learned? Put in the comments. Always love hearing from you. If you like our Facebook page, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and and again, share what you're learning so the other people that are watching this can learn, and I can learn from you as well. So thanks for joining us for Wolf's Watch. If you want more info, some of the stuff that we don't include in the broadcasts, in summaries of points, some of the info from our TV show that we do, that streams on Roku and Amazon Fire TV, go to adventureceo.tv. Again, that's adventureceo.tv. There's some info on a once a month email newsletter that we do that includes some of those tips, tricks, insights, heads up about people that we'll be interviewing, and information that we didn't have time to include in the TV shows or in some of these broadcasts. Thanks for being here on Wolf's Watch. Always enjoy having you part of the conversation, and I will see you on the trail.